Lately, a strange genre of videos has surfaced on the internet. Shaky, often dismissed as hoaxes. They show something impossible. Trees, moving from one place to another all on their own. It's pretty obvious that the videos are fake, but the feeling of dread that came with it is real. It shows an innate fear within ourselves, where if an object that's supposed to be unmoving starts to move, causes a deep feeling of dread that connects us to the feeling of death of the uncanny valley. It triggers a primal alarm bell within the oldest part of our brain, a part that remembers a time when the shadows themselves were hungry. To understand this fear, we must look at the trees themselves. They are some of the oldest living beings on this planet. Their timescale is not of ours. A year for us is a single, slow breath for them. We see them as passive, static. But what if their stillness is not passivity? It's a strategy. We already know that the plant kingdom is not entirely benign. Carnivorous plants proves a fundamental truth, that vegetation can derive nutrients from flesh. It is a small, logical step from a fly trap that snaps shut in seconds to a larger, more complex organism that operates on a much, much slower clock. What if there are trees, or things that look like trees, that have evolved to supplement their diet from the sun with meat? Not insects, larger, warmer prey. This leads us to the most terrifying possibility: mimicry. In nature, predators perfect the art of deception. The chameleon hiding in plain sight, tigers practically unseen in the dense bushes. So, what's the perfect disguise for a patient terrestrial predator? What form allows it to stand in plain sight, unnoticed, for years, centuries even? The form of a tree. Imagine a creature, ancient and unknown to science, that is the perfect tree mimic. It roots itself in fertile soil, not just for water, but to feel the vibrations of the earth, to feel the footfalls of everything that walks its domain. Its bark is not bark, but a hide of incredible resilience. It doesn't use its leaves for photosynthesis, but perhaps to sense heat, or to absorb the chemical signals of fear that animals, that we release. It is a blind, deaf, and utterly patient hunter. And it sees us not as people, but as walking, talking sources of vital energy, a potential meal. So, how does it hunt? It doesn't pounce, it converges. Its movement is imperceptible to a casual glance. Over the course of a night, it might shift its routes, closing off a path by a few inches. Over a week, it might slowly lean a heavy branch over a game trail, creating a sense of enclosure. It creates some sort of funnel. It herds its prey. Or worse, what if it's quick? For us visual creatures, its greatest weapon is a simple act of us looking away. You glance down to look at your phone. You turn to check the trail behind you. And in that split second of inattention, it moved. Not slowly, but with a sudden, silent rush, covering ground in the blink of an eye, only to become perfectly still once again. It has no need for a chase. It simply repositions itself over and over. Always in your peripheral vision, always just a little closer. In a forest of thousands identical trunks, it never has to hide. It just has to be still when you are looking. Think of the stories. The hiker who swears the woods look different from the way back. The camper who wakes up with the gut feeling that the tree line is closer than it was. These are not just nerves. This is the hunt. You're being corralled. And when you are isolated, when the dread has reached its peak, that's when it strikes. Not with a roar, but with a sudden, shocking lunge of a branch that was a limb moments before. Or perhaps it doesn't need to strike at all. Perhaps it simply absorbs you. Root-like tendrils emerging from the soil to drag the paralyzed prey into the earth, to be slowly digested at the base of its trunk. The forest would simply swallow the evidence. It sounds like a campfire story, but imagine a what-if encounter, if such entities do exist. Let's make an example story out of it. A story where for one man was the last story he would be a part of. Let's say his name was Leo, an experienced hiker who arrived at a base camp in the peak of summer. As he set up his tent, he noticed a single odd tree on the edge of the clearing. A tall oak with brilliant yellow leaves. A stark contrast to the lush green of the surrounding pines. It was strange, but he dismissed it as a quirk of nature before heading to the lodge for the evening. He spent a pleasant night socializing with other hikers, the odd tree completely forgotten. The next morning, as he prepared for his hike, he glanced at the clearing. The yellow oak was gone. There was no stump, no disturbance in the grass. It had simply vanished. Puzzled, he walked over to the camp supervisor. "Hey," Leo asked, "what happened to that yellow oak tree over there? Did you guys cut it down?" The supervisor stopped and followed Leo's gaze to the empty clearing. His face was blank. "Can't say I ever see a tree there, son. Especially not a yellow one. You sure you didn't dream it?" The answer was unsettling, but Leo was a practical man. He shrugged it off, chalking it up to a strange mistake, and started his hike. It was a minor mystery, nothing more. He had a hike planned, so he pushed the feeling down, attributed it to a trick of a memory, and set off on his trail. Hours into the hike, he was exhausted. He stopped for a lunch on a rocky outcrop. As he drank from his canteen, his eyes scanned the valley below. A splash of vibrant color caught his eye. There, far in the distance, was a tree with brilliant yellow leaves. A chuckle escaped him. "There you are," he whispered. But the relief was short-lived. He squinted, his smile fading. The shape of it, the specific, gnarled twist of its main branches. It looked exactly the same. Not just the same species, the same tree. It was impossible. Of course, it had to be a trick of the mind, a coincidence of nature. But the resemblance was uncanny. As he packed up his things and continued his hike, a quiet unease settled over him. The trail no longer felt as welcoming, the silence between the trees feeling less like peace and more like a held breath. The weather turned gloomy, the sky darkened prematurely, and a cold rain began to fall. Leo scrambled, rushing to find a flat spot to pitch his tent, his heart hammering in his chest. As he hammered the final tent peg, he saw it again. The oak tree. This time, it was at the edge of the tree line, significantly closer than before. Close enough to see the gnarled pattern of its bark. He was now genuinely questioning his sanity. Was he lost? Was this the same tree? The rain became a downpour, forcing him to retreat into the safety of his tent. Leo was baffled. He was still questioning himself whether he saw the same tree or not. But he was exhausted. The hike took too much from him, so he fell into a stupor. Hours later, he was woken from his fitful sleep by a sound. A slow, grating scrape against the nylon fabric of his tent. He froze. A tall, dark shadow fell across the tent wall, blocking the faint moonlight. Paralyzed, he slowly, carefully unzipped a tiny peephole, and he saw it. Not a person, not an animal. It was bark. The rough, deeply textured bark of the oak tree, right outside his tent. Terror granted him a burst of adrenaline. He threw his backpack on, unzipped the main door in one frantic motion, and bolted out of it. He ran blindly, the slippery trail giving way beneath his feet. His last memory was the sickening sensation of falling, tumbling, down a steep, rocky incline. When he awoke, every part of him was in agony, and it was there. The oak tree was bent over him at an unnatural, impossible angle. Its trunk curved like a predatory spine. Its heavy, root-like branches pinned his leg and chest to the muddy ground. He tried to scream, but a wiry, thin branch was already coiled tightly around his throat, tightening with a slow, deliberate pressure. The last thing he saw was the network of roots around him, beginning to shift and move, slithering through the soil like snakes, pulling him down. He was reported missing the following day. Search parties found his campsite. The tent, collapsed and empty. The only clue was a trail leading away from it. A wide, deep gouge in the earth, as if something immense and heavy had dragged itself and its prize back into the heart of the forest. The story was one thing, and it proves that the very existence of these videos, their power to unsettle us despite their artifice, proves that this concept taps into something deep within us. A primal unease, a vestigial fear from a time when the dark woods had very real dangers, and the line between the animate and the inanimate was not so clear. We are unnerved by the idea that the world is not so passive, that the landscape itself might be aware, and that awareness is not so benevolent. So, the next time you're on a hike and you get that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, and you find yourself staring a little too long at a particular tree, just know that reaction isn't coming from nowhere. It is an old, hard-coded response. You're feeling the weight of a very old, very quiet wilderness. And on some level, you're just checking to make sure that it's still asleep.